This is the holy city of Jerusalem, and it's the day before Easter. These people have come from hundreds or thousands of miles away, standing for hours, even days, waiting for something that for many will be the most important moment of their entire lives. It's a moment of power and ancient mystery that is a culmination, renewal, and physical affirmation of their Christian faith. They're here to see a real, live miracle.
The miracle of the holy fire. It's probably my favorite thing ever in the study of religion. It's ancient, loud, colorful, and very mysterious. But of course, the first thing anybody anywhere has ever said when talking about a miracle is it real? And that's what I want to know. I'm going to look at the history, theories, accusations, and scientific evidence, and then I'm going to do some of my own literally hands-on experiments. And if something supports the miracle, I'll happily say so. But if something doesn't add up, well, I'm looking for answers. What I can promise is to do this in the most respectful but honest way possible based on the facts. Then we can all talk about it in the comments. Tell me I'm right, wrong, crazy. I just want to hear from all of you. Also, please take half a second to hit the like button. It's the freest, easiest way to support my channel and keep videos like this coming. Okay, let's start with a quick miracle recap. It all happens here, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. It's built over the traditional site of Jesus' tomb, which is here, a little structure called the edicule in the main rotunda. Inside there's a small antechamber, then a tiny door where you'll find a stone slab that's believed by the Orthodox, Catholics, and basically every non-Protestant Christian to be the exact spot where Jesus was resurrected. The miracle is controlled by the Greek Orthodox and happens on the Saturday before Easter, also known as Great or Holy Saturday. Let's look at the highlights in this account from a Russian monk in 1846. Morning of Great Saturday. Extinguishing of the lamps in the Holy Sepulchre, and the tomb is sealed. Afternoon, procession 3 times around the edicule. Precisely 2 p.m., the Greek Patriarch is searched, the seal on the tomb is broken, and he enters alone. Several minutes later, light fills the tomb, and there is great tumult among the faithful. And many of these faithful have claimed to experience things like candles spontaneously lighting, blue orbs or flashes, and of course, the supposed inability of the flame to burn skin for the first 33 minutes. Anyway, the reason the Russian monk's account is so interesting is because from 1846, it's actually the earliest one that completely matches what we see today. As ancient as it claims to be, the miracle of the holy fire has actually evolved a lot over its history. So, only about 100 years after Jesus, Jerusalem was still ruled by pagan Rome, and a temple to Venus stood over the site of the crucifixion. By 323, the Roman Empire had adopted Christianity, the pagan temple in Jerusalem was torn down, and in 335, the Holy Sepulchre was completed. After that, it takes about 50 years to get our first ever description inside the church on Great Saturday. It comes from a pilgrim named Egeria, who was probably from Spain and kept a diary. In it she wrote, "On Saturday, the Easter Vigil is observed here exactly as we observe it at home. All the torches and candles are lighted, the light is taken from inside the tomb, where night and day a lamp always burns." So this is a bit weird. She's definitely describing the miracle of the holy fire, except for the whole miracle part. There's candles, fire from the tomb, but nothing out of the ordinary. Exactly as we observe it at home, and inside the tomb where a lamp always burns. What she was actually very casually describing was simply the Jerusalem version of a very non-miraculous candlelighting ceremony that she knew from Spain, and something that churches from around the world still do every Easter. Egeria also stayed in Jerusalem for 3 years, and at no point does she hint at a miracle. Really, the only conclusion we can come to is that there was no holy fire during this era. And this is confirmed by the next 500 years of accounts. There's just no mention of an Easter miracle. And numerous descriptions of the church and its customs exist from this time. But it's not until finally in the 9th century that a monk named Bernard visited Jerusalem and wrote, "It is worth saying what happens on Holy Saturday. An angel comes and kindles light in the lamps which hang above the sepulchre. It's a simple description, kind of laid back, but at least it's definitely talking about a miracle. And from here on, the accounts really start rolling in. And not just from Christian sources. Jerusalem had been under Islamic rule since about the year 638, and the first time we hear about the fire supposedly not burning the skin is actually from a Muslim source in 900. In fact, many records from the 10th century describe the everyday Muslims as loving the miracle, but not everybody was impressed. In 947, a local emir complained, "In performing your celebrated miracle with magic artifices, you have filled all of Syria with the religion of the Christians." This is such an interesting account because it both supports the miracle by showing how far-reaching it was, but also introduces the first accusations of magic and fakery into the historical record. Which is why, during this time, we first see government officials, whether they were Arab, Turkish, or today Israeli police, standing guard and actually searching the tomb for any hidden ways of starting a fire. And by the year 1009, this skepticism is taken to an extreme level. Caliph el-Hakim, leader of the Fatimid dynasty, is so outraged by the miracle, claiming it was done deceitfully with the oil of balsam, that he says, "Forget trying to prove it's a hoax," and just destroys the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, burned it to the ground. After 20 years and el-Hakim's assassination, the Christians were allowed to rebuild the church, but this devastating attack actually sets in motion the events that would eventually lead to the Crusades. Along the way, in 1054, we get the Great Schism, the final separation of the Roman Catholic Church and Eastern Orthodoxy, which meant that in 1009, when the Catholic Crusaders captured Jerusalem, they were not very friendly towards the Greek priests. Predictably, the Catholics took over, and on the next Great Saturday, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem entered the tomb to receive the fire, and nothing happens. It was so humiliating that they allowed the Greek Patriarch to return the following day, now Easter Sunday, and boom, the miracle is back. From a Greek perspective, this was great. Clearly, Orthodoxy must be the true religion. But skeptics today see it as proof of a hoax, that the Catholics simply didn't know how to magic up the fire. In 1322, the timing of the miracle seems to finally settle in at 2 p.m. And in 1481, we find the very first reference to the Patriarch actually being inside the tomb at the moment the fire appears. Okay, wait a minute. I kinda left this bit out, but in every description so far, the Patriarch was not inside the tomb. He and everybody else would stand outside nervously praying until an extremely bright light would appear inside the edicule. The Patriarch would then go inside and retrieve it. But today he's always inside at the crucial moment. We don't know why it shifted, but after the mid-1400s, the accounts all changed. So in 1580, we get a little extra miracle. The Holy Sepulchre is actually divided between several denominations, who even today often argue and sometimes literally fight over the space. There are the Greek Orthodox, of course, Catholics, and another is the Armenian Church, who by the 16th century wanted a part of the miracle. In fact, they wanted the whole thing. So one Easter, they bribed the Ottoman ruler to lock out the Greeks. Well, much like the Crusaders 500 years earlier, the Armenian priest failed to produce the fire. However, the Greeks had filled the courtyard outside, a lightning bolt shot from the sky, cracking this column and lighting the candle of the Patriarch. The truth of this event is debatable, but the very real tensions behind it led to a compromise. It's true that the Greek Patriarch enters the inner tomb alone, but for the last 450 years, an Armenian priest has stood in the antechamber just inside the door to the edicule. Finally, we arrive back to 1846, and although these are just a few of the highlights, we can see that over 1700 years, many aspects have fluctuated, such as the time of day and who, if anyone, is actually inside the tomb. But I think the most striking thing is that the holy fire clearly didn't begin until sometime in the 9th century. We'll return to what that may mean, but now that we understand the evolution of the event, we can get to the good stuff. The conspiracies, hypotheses, and scientific research that attempt to explain this miracle. Over the centuries, skeptics have dismissed the fire as a fraud. While some theories have been complex, they often simply say the Patriarch uses something like a match. So let's start by taking a look at one of the main miracle arguments, the searching and sealing of the tomb. If the COVID-19 pandemic gave us one useful thing, it was an empty church during the 2020 Holy Fire. This gives us a perfect view from news coverage that year with no one inside but those directly involved. Looking at the tape, we can see that the initial search of the edicule just doesn't happen. It's very dark in there, and I have no problem believing that the candles have been put out, but this video begins an hour before the tomb is sealed, and I've sat and watched every second of it. And at no point does a police officer even go inside. While it's possible that the search took place before this video began, multiple priests still go in and out of the tomb, making any earlier search completely irrelevant. Next, the big wax seal is put on. Finally, the Patriarch arrives, there's a procession around the rotunda, and then he's ready to go in. No, we didn't see the tomb searched. But now is the real moment believers point to as proof of the miracle, the police pat-down. For centuries, the local police have supposedly searched the Patriarch for anything he could use to light the fire. But again, in this or any other video, we simply don't see it. Robes are removed as a sign of respect, but none of the officers even lay a finger on him, let alone conduct any sort of search. Of course, this doesn't mean the Patriarch definitely has a lighter. The Israelis are only interested in keeping the peace, not disproving or proving a miracle. And historically, under Muslim rule, the authorities really hated the holy fire, and it's likely that the searches were far more thorough in the past. But from what we see today, you have to admit it's at least possible that something could be brought into the tomb. And that's okay, because it's really the potentially supernatural essence of the fire that can give us the kind of scientific evidence we're looking for. Miracles are kind of the opposite of science, right? The whole point is that they can't be explained, which is why very few academics on either side have attempted to really examine the holy fire. Of those few, by far the most commonly discussed is Russian physicist and devout believer Andrei Volkov. In 2008, Volkov attended the holy fire with scientific instruments to test his theory that the fire isn't really fire, but plasma. So what's plasma? Lightning is plasma, neon lights are plasma, stars are plasma, and this is plasma, highly ionized and electrically charged gas. What we need to know is that there are forms of plasma that can look like flame and at roughly the same temperature of the human body are cool enough to touch. And this form of plasma is Volkov's expertise. Because plasma is highly electrified, it's detectable by an EMF meter like this. Volkov's meter was much more advanced, but it did essentially the same thing. And he claims that it recorded a sharp increase in the electromagnetic field inside the church at the moment the holy fire descended. His report was shared throughout the Orthodox world, becoming the go-to piece of evidence for supporting the miraculous nature of the fire. A real scientist with real equipment and real results. What more could you want? Well, it turns out a lot, actually. Almost everything we know about Volkov's experiments come from a surprisingly brief article in the April 2012 edition of the Russian Journal of Science and Religion. In it, there are no real numbers and just a grainy picture of the readings from his meter that apparently show fluctuations at the time of the miracle. And while he does use a very serious piece of equipment called an oscilloscope, it's important to understand exactly what it is. The brand he used was picoscope, which is really used for diagnosing electrical problems in cars. It has a probe you place at different points to test voltage levels, giving a very precise reading on a connected laptop. So while voltage was essentially what Volkov was trying to test, he was, according to him, 15 to 17 meters from the tomb, just holding this probe into the air. This is footage from 2008, and somewhere in that mass of people is Volkov holding out his probe. As you can see with my meter, it reads anything around it producing or using electricity. A plasma ball, a laptop, or a camera flash. I like what he's trying to do with actual instruments, but the implementation and lack of any clear published data really makes it impossible to draw any conclusions from Volkov's experiments. The skeptical yin to Volkov's true believer yang is the Greek engineer Michael Kallipolis. For decades, Greeks have seen his many books and talk show appearances questioning religion in general. Here he is with a panel of holy fire believers while he experiments with a highly flammable element called phosphorus. This is brushed onto the candle where after a certain amount of time, it'll react with oxygen and suddenly combust. It's a pretty cool experiment, but this priest clearly doesn't think so. And actually, he might be right to be upset. The big problem Kallipolis doesn't mention is that phosphorus wasn't discovered until 1669, 800 years after the first account of the holy fire. However, elsewhere he does explain that this is more of a demonstration that substances like this exist and have existed. Greek fire would be the most famous historical example, and although the recipe and knowledge of its exact properties was lost, it's fair to say that these sorts of things were around long before the miracle began. Overall, it really is intriguing, but does leave you wanting a little bit more. There really needs to be something to connect the holy fire to this chemical hypothesis in order to actually start to take it seriously. So it's way after midnight, I'm in my office, but I just wanted to film this right now because I think I had a major breakthrough. I left off talking about Michael Kallipolis and how phosphorus happened way too late, but that it's kind of like Greek fire. Just mentioned it and moved on. But I just got this urge to really look it up. And listen to this. Real Greek fire was first used in 672 AD. The earliest account of the holy fire is 870 AD. 200 years later, but after is the point. And for the first 600 to 700 years of the holy fire, it was always described as this incredibly bright light filling the edicule and flooding the church from within. Not really how it looks today. Lots of candles, but not exactly this blinding light. But Greek fire was described like this. It looked like a dragon flying through the air. Such a bright light did it cast, as though it were day. Okay, it's interesting, but big deal. But that's not what hit me. I keep reading and see that the recipe for Greek fire was finally lost with the fall of Constantinople in 1453. And I think 1453, something happened in our holy fire timeline right around then. I check my notes and boom, 1481. This is when we get the first record of the Patriarch actually going inside the tomb to receive the holy fire. Remember, it's clear that in every description before then, he waited outside with everybody else until they saw a big flash from inside the tomb. Then he would go inside and retrieve it. But in 1481, out of nowhere, he starts going inside. I mean, it's an enormous change. Could it be because until then, they were using Greek fire? Constantinople was the seat of the Orthodox Church, and while they closely guarded the secret, it's easy to see a scenario where some of the Greek fire made its way to Jerusalem every Easter. Until, of course, it's lost. Which aligns almost exactly with the most dramatic shift we see in the entire history of the miracle. Within 30 years. I don't know, the loss of Greek fire, the Patriarch going inside the tomb. Okay, let's reset. Working with the it used to be Greek fire hypothesis, we still don't know how the Patriarch would get a flame inside the tomb. Yes, we've established that the Israelis don't really check it anymore, but it's clear that there's no fire inside when the edicule is sealed. Lighters and matches were invented far too late, and things like flint fire strikers are loud and strenuous. And come on, it's a solemn and holy ceremony. The Patriarch wasn't in the tomb of Jesus, rubbing stones together, trying to land a spark precisely on a candle wick. So, let's go back to the tape. Alright, we've seen this part before. The tomb is sealed 2 hours before the miracle. But this is the part that I missed. A full 10 minutes before the Patriarch enters, it's unsealed. I'd always assumed this was done just before he goes inside, but he's off at the back of the tomb still doing the ritual procession. And then, this happens. This is a Greek priest with the silver lantern that supposedly catches the holy fire. He stands there for a moment and then goes inside with the lantern and the door shut behind him. More than that, the other priests seem to be almost guarding the tomb. He's in there for just over 2 minutes, which seems like a long time to set down a lantern. And when he comes out, the others are screening the tomb. The priest who had the lantern has to almost squeeze between them. It clearly seems like there's something they don't want you to see. Is this lantern the way the fire has been secretly brought into the tomb since 1453? Okay, you're saying all of this is conjecture, and so far that's totally fair. But take a look at this legitimately astonishing moment from one of the very few who have been inside the tomb for the holy fire. In this Greek news segment, an Israeli journalist interviews an Armenian bishop inside the church. And he's not just any Armenian. He's this Armenian, actually sealed inside the tomb just a few feet away from where the fire descends. And this is what he had to say.
Torches, and they light their torches from the lit oil lamp on the tomb, and they go out, they distribute the light as being the holy fire.
They light it from the oil lamp?
They light it from the oil lamp that is put here, yes.
But the belief is that the fire comes from the sky.
No, we believe to miracles. But I didn't see, I've done 3 times. It didn't happen, the miracle. God does not perform miracles just to please people.
No, I'm sorry, this is a false, I'm sorry.
I've done 3 times.
Okay, I'm sorry, but
please don't intervene.
Father, I'm sorry. Okay. I am responsible here. Stop the camera. Stop the camera.
You cannot anyway.
Stop the camera.
Well, that was pretty intense. Not only does he state that there's no miracle, but he also explains how it's done, corresponding extremely closely with what we saw on the tape. I do have to point out that when this was released, the Greek Patriarchate immediately refuted the Armenian priest's claims. And as we've discussed, the Armenian and Greek churches have fought and argued for centuries. I mean, a Greek priest was actually chaperoning during the video.
Stop the camera.
It's still incredibly compelling evidence from someone who was actually there. But for now, it would be unfair to not keep in mind the impact the bitter political situation might have had on his testimony. And no matter how intriguing all of this may be, the biggest thing people will keep coming back to is if it's not a miracle, why doesn't the fire burn? And it's a really good point. Would you want to do this with a non-miraculous candle? No. And neither do I. But I'm gonna do it anyway. So let's go over to the laboratory. Just this side of the room. Come on. Okay, I've moved over to the Miracle Workshop where I have 2 real-life Jerusalem candle bundles. But of course, this is not the holy fire. And that's the entire point. Because if I can replicate what we see in the videos with that, it might tell us a lot about the miraculous nature of the fire. Also, do not try this at home. Okay, I guess I just go for it. It's burning. Get my hand through the fire. Not having too much trouble. Can feel it, it's warm, it's definitely pretty warm, but I'm pretty happy to do that. I could do this all day. I mean, it's hot. If I held my hand there, it would be a problem, but you don't really see that in videos from people at the Holy Fire. Hey, real fire. So I think that probably looked a little bit like what you see on Easter in Jerusalem. Now I'm gonna take a little bit of this water, and not because I'm trying to cheat, but remember, it gets pretty warm in Jerusalem. Sometimes Easter is as late as May there. And these people have been in this church for maybe 10 hours, thousands of them mushed together. They get sweaty. So I'm trying to replicate, get a little bit of dampness here, nothing crazy. Immediately, that's a huge difference. Everything is telling me not to leave my hand in there too long, but honestly, I probably could if I really had to. All right, this is the part I didn't really want to do, but I'm gonna give it a little bit of a shot. And I'm gonna use the water, but just a little bit. All right, no idea how close I was there. It felt close, but I think that's all I'm gonna do. We'll check the tape, but warm, but I could do it. All still there? Yeah. So I just looked at the tape of what I did, and was it as intense as some of the videos we see? No. But come on, my hand, arm, and face were in the flame. And I was okay. It didn't hurt, I don't have any burns, and I think if I was in that intense atmosphere of the sepulchre at Easter, I probably would have been able to go a lot farther on that kind of adrenaline. Does that mean I think the whole thing is a hoax? Absolutely not. There's no way that I can replicate the holy fire. The only way to really know would be to go to Jerusalem and feel the flame for myself. And that is why I have come to Jerusalem. In part 2, I'll be examining the Holy Sepulchre in person, talking more about the politics surrounding the miracle, and looking at even more revealing interviews with those directly involved with the Holy Fire. Hey gang, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. You don't want to miss part 2. I'll put the link in the description and over here somewhere once it's up. But until then, I'll see you in Jerusalem on Great Saturday.